who are joining today. I'm thrilled to have, um, wow, I get overwhelmed just thinking about this, but someone that I can call a friend by the name of Gary Beikirch. Gary is a Medal of Honor recipient, um, served in Vietnam, has an amazing story, and I've gotten to know Gary and Lolly, his wife Lolly, over the past few years at different events around the country. I think maybe, Gary, the last time we were together was in December for a Rees Across America event,
Yes.
where I sang and Gary spoke. So, um, folks, I'm thrilled to have Gary Beikirch here with us today. Um, Gary, first of all, just tell the folks, where do you live right now? Where are you located? And then give us just a brief description of what life is for you right now.
Mm. Yeah, well, currently my wife and I live up in what is starting to thaw out, the frozen tundra of Western New York along Lake Ontario. Um, we've had some sunshine the last few days, but this is actually where I was born, in Western New York, and I left um, when I went into the military, and then I came back after I was married, and we've been here since 1979. My wife and I, we have 3 children, 14 grandchildren, and all of them live right within 5-10 minutes of us, which is a real blessing. And actually, it's probably one of the reasons that keeps us here in Western New York, is 14 grandkids. Especially when the winters start blowing around and the polar vortex moves in, there's a lot of just huddling around the fireplace. But the benefit of having 14 grandkids, um, it far outweighs any of the negatives of living in New York. Um, you know,
Um,
there's a saying that says that it's harder to hit a moving target. And since we haven't been moving since February because of the pandemic, um, I have been more busy than when I was traveling on the road speaking all over. I probably do 3 or 4 interviews, podcasts, Zoom classrooms, speaking to ROTC graduations. Um, it's just been really, really busy since February. So we haven't really been fighting the battle of boredom and getting, like many people say, I just don't know what to do anymore. My wife and I have been kept really busy.
I don't think people understand sometimes for Medal of Honor recipients. And Gary, help me, are there 70 living right now or 71 or what's the present?
69.
69.
Yeah, we just lost Benny Atkins and Ron
Yep.
Schumer.
Okay. So folks, to be able to have Gary with us today, he is part of a rare group, 69 living Medal of Honor recipients, and they are in much demand to inspire and encourage people. Um, Gary, years ago, I had a friend who was a special forces um, soldier, and he gave me, oh gosh, it's got some green on it, so it's not going to show properly, but maybe you can see it. You can see what that is, Gary.
That's the flash, what they
And,
call the flash for the 5th Special Forces Group.
and on it, it has the Latin words "De oppresso liber."
Right.
Tell people what that means and the significance of this.
Well, it's for many of the services they have like a motto, and usually it's from the Latin, like Semper Fi is the Marines, which means always faithful. Special Forces adopted the motto of De oppresso liber, which means liberator of the oppressed. And to me, that in a very short words represents what I believe lives in the heart of every person who joins Special Forces. Our mission has always been to be willing to go anywhere at any time, to become part of a people, to become part of a culture, to become part of, in my instance, to become part of a jungle tribe that lived in the highlands of Vietnam for the sole purpose of teaching them how to defend themselves, to teach them how to liberate themselves, to teach them how to come out from under the tyranny of those that are oppressing them. And that's the motto of Special Forces. And right now, Special Forces they're operating all over the world. You may not hear about them, but that's okay because we refer to ourselves as the quiet professionals, unlike some other units. We're the quiet professionals.
When my friend Bill presented this with me, or presented this to me, I was taken back. He would hear me sing. Normally, once a month, I would go to a local pastor's home. I'd go over to Jack Hayford's house, and I'd sing for a group of pastors. And Gary at the time was assisting Pastor Jack, and he gave me this one night after I'd finished singing because he said, "Steve, I want you to have this," because he said, because when I hear you sing, I feel like you are helping to set people free,
Right.
which was very, very meaningful to me.
And that's a good thought.
Well,
you do set people free.
Well, I was humbled by that. Gary, you mentioned becoming Special Forces. That was kind of your intention from the very beginning when you signed up, right?
Well, that's a funny story. And at the risk of blowing any bubbles and illusions that people might have about my service and things, the only reason I went to college was because the girl that I was going with at the time was going to college. And I said, okay, I'll go with you. And my goal was we were going to be married and spend the rest of our lives together. We were there for less than a month and she broke up with me. And so I said, well, what does a red-blooded American boy do back in the 60s when his girl breaks up with him? I'm going to join the military. I'm going to make her jealous. And the best way to make her jealous was to go into the best unit, which at the time for me, I believe, and still is the best unit. I'm going to become a Green Beret. I'm going to get that Green Beret on. I'm going to come back on that campus. I'm going to walk up to her and she's going to see what she's missing. And that was, I joke about that, but I'm sure that was in there somewhere in my motivations. But there were other things at play as to why I wanted to become a Green Beret. It was the best trained unit. I had just finished reading a book called The Green Berets by Robin Moore. Vietnam was getting very, very big back in the mid 60s. And I always was wondering about it. I'm the kind of guy that I have to learn by experience. It's probably not the wisest thing. Solomon definitely says it's not the wisest way to learn, but I always wanted to learn by experience. And there were many questions I had about Vietnam. And so I said, well, I'm going to go there. I'll go there to see what it's really all about.
So was it more of a curiosity, or was there the desire to, go back and show the girl, or was there a desire to serve?
There was a desire to serve. A good friend of mine, his girlfriend broke up with him too. So one day we were sitting at the bar, and his name was Don, and he said, "So Gary, what are we going to do?" And I said, "I don't know, Don, what are you going to do?" I always had a problem making decisions, And he said, "Well, I'm going to go in the Marine Corps," because he had a heritage of being, his whole family was Marines. And he said, "Come on in, we'll go in the buddy system." And I said, "I'm not going to the Marines, Don. Those guys are crazy. I'm going to go in the Green Berets. That's what I'll do." And so Don went in the Marine Corps, and I went in the Green Berets. Because of the challenge, because of the training, I think the challenge was a big part too. I always needed to prove myself. I had to develop this attitude of, I can do whatever I need to do. If I need something, if I want something, I can achieve it. And maybe that's because I grew up in a broken home. We moved 11 different times. I went to 11 different schools before ninth grade. I never really had any stable home environment. And so I always developed this independent attitude and a real sense of self-sufficiency. And the best way to prove that was to meet this next challenge of going into the Green Berets. I remember going down to this recruiter and I told him, I said, I'm going to be a Green Beret. And he laughed at me and he said, you can't just enlist to be a Green Beret. He said, but I think I can get you into the infantry, airborne, and then you can just go on for the next challenge and the next challenge. And he said, but I don't think you can do it. And that was, he laid down a challenge and that was enough for me. I just said, where do I sign? And so I signed up and I quit college and went in the military, headed for, in my mind, the ultimate goal was being able to wear the Green Beret.
Gary, over your right shoulder, you've got a copy of, and a lot of, what you're sharing about Don and so forth. I've been reading. Gary's got a copy of the book over his right shoulder there, Blaze of Light, the inspiring true story of Green Beret medic Gary Beikirch, Medal of Honor recipient, written along with Marcus Brotherton. One of the things, Gary, as I read the book, that really astounds me, you became a medic. I'm amazed. It's like you were a surgeon. I mean, you were performing surgeries and so forth, but how in the world do they train you? So you were not only a Green Beret, but you became a medic. You would do procedures, sometimes local anesthetics, sometimes general anesthetics, there in the field. How in the world do you get trained like that and so quickly?
Well, the medical training was a significant part of our almost 2 years of training. And it was very intensive. It was 24/7. We were trained at medical facilities both at Fort Bragg, then down at Fort Hood, where Fort Hood was the Army Medical Center for all of the military. And we would be instructed by doctors. We were trained in surgical procedures, diagnosis and treatment of diseases, laboratory work. We were trained in dentistry. We were trained in veterinary medicine, because in a situation, like in our situation in where I was in Dak Siang, there were 2,300 people in the tribe that I worked with, that I became a part of. And they were out in the middle of the jungle. I was their only source of medical treatment. I was their only source of dental, veterinary care. The training was very, very extensive at Fort Sam under doctor's care. From there, we went to 8 weeks of OJT. I went to Darnell Army Hospital at Fort Hood, where we had rotations through the emergency room. We had rotations through the surgical, obstetrics, the lab. After 8 weeks, we then went back to Fort Bragg, where they had a program that I think was one of the best programs I've ever gone through. They don't do it anymore, but it was called Dog Lab, where we would pick up a dog. We no longer could refer to him as a dog. They became our patient. We then did a physical to make sure that the patient could survive all the procedures. And we then went out and we shot the dog in the hindquarters. We went in, did a wound debridement, IV cut down. We had to nurse that dog back to health without any antibiotics, because many times in the field you would not have antibiotics. You just had to do continual wound debridement, sterile technique. We then practiced amputations, tracheotomies. And after 8 weeks, many of the medics that were in training developed a real bond with their patient. So there were a lot of three-legged dogs running around Fort Bragg. That was they could always tell who was an SF medic, because he'd be walking around with a three-legged dog. But that was a very extensive part of the training. And after that, then we went to our medical boards, where we had to sit before a board of doctors and answer spontaneous questions, role play situations. It was really, really intensive. Some of the best training I've ever gone through. And actually, the physician's assistant programs that are going on now, those were started so that Special Forces medics and Navy corpsmen would be able to transfer the skills that we had coming out of the military into the civilian life. Because even with all the training, up until they started the PA program, none of that training, none of the certifications that we had were transferable to civilian life. So they started these PA programs so that we could go in and become certified to practice in a civilian life.
Does the military train medics in the same way today?
Um, Special Forces medics there's some changes. They don't do a dog lab. They work on life like dummies. Regular combat medics have an 8-week combat medic course. Like I said, ours was probably a little over a year, year and a half. But the regular medic course is 8 weeks to become a combat medic.
Gary, when you went to Vietnam, um, and I'm not certain I caught all this, but you didn't have like regular orders or something like that? You got over there and they didn't know what to do with you?
Yeah, well, yeah, I had uh, I had certain qualities that were um, really sought out by special forces. I was not big. I was not strong. I was certainly not the strongest or the biggest special forces guy, but I had a very strong independence. I thought out of the box. Um, and I also always had a problem with authorities. I was always getting in trouble. Basic training, you normally had KP once in 8 weeks. I had it 9 times because I just could not follow orders. I was always questioning things. Why? Why do I have to do this? And it doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, I had gotten in some trouble, and I ended up going to Vietnam. And when I was shipping out at Fort Lewis, Washington, and I had a friend that was there that I had known in high school. He was in the military. He was married. And he said, well, why don't you just spend some time with us? And I said, okay. So we got spending time, and my date for leaving, according to my orders, that passed because we had been drinking and stuff. And I just said, yeah, I'll stay a few more days. What are they going to do? Send me to Vietnam? Yeah. So I finally decided it was time for me to go. I went in and reported late, and they looked at me, and they just put me on a new set of orders, and I went over not on the original set. So when I got into Cameron Bay, they just didn't really know what to do with me. So I got sent to a replacement company, which was not a good place to be. And so I was working there. I was doing some work with a burnout latrines, and this other special forces, he was a sergeant major. He was walking by, and he saw me with my beret, and he asked me what I was doing, and I said, I'm just waiting around. And he said, what's your MOS? What's your job? And I said, I'm a medic. And he said, we need medics. And he said, come with me. And he said, I don't have any orders or anything. And he said, that's okay. I'll take care of all that. He put me on a chopper and took me up to Nha Trang. And finally, I was with the unit I wanted to be with. And if I had spent time in the replacement company, I could have got sent to any other conventional unit, which I didn't want. So I was glad to be able to find this sergeant major and have him help me get signed to a special forces team.
You wound up going to Doc Sang, right?
Yes. Yep.
Tell us about Doc Sang. I mean, as I read the book, I thought it sounded like a little mini city in the middle of no place almost. Is the only how would people get there? Was it only by chopper, or tell us? Take from here and then just tell us about your time there in Doc Sang.
Yeah. Well, for me, when people hear my story, I tell them that it's not really. It's more than a war story. And after hearing my story, people say, really, it is more than a war story. It's like a love story. And it is. It's a love story. And that love developed when I went to the camp at Doc Sang. It was a camp in the middle of the jungle, in the highlands. It was along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. There were 2,300 people with the tribe that I was with. There's about 30 tribes of Montagnards, which were scattered throughout the highlands in Vietnam.
Tell people what a Montagnard is.
Montagnard is it's a French word that means mountain people. These were people who lived in the jungle. Many of them still wore loincloths. They hunted with crossbows. they were a very primitive people. Um, I, I hesitate to use the word primitive because they taught me so much. When I compare me to them, I was more primitive to them. Um, we lived we lived in very primitive conditions. Uh, when they were living in the jungles and the villages, they had some real nice huts, but those huts were very susceptible to attacks by the NVA. The enemy, none of the Vietnamese really liked the Montagnards. They wanted to eradicate them, and so they were always under attack. We would go in there, we would befriend them, try to become part of their tribe, try to become part of their people. We went in as a student, which is one of the things that Special Forces taught me. In order to establish a relationship with someone, in order to be able to share what you want to share with them, go in as a student, not as an arrogant person who's going to teach these people how to live. Um, these were people that taught me how to live. When I went to that camp, uh, what we did in order to provide more defenses for them, we would bring them into a camp that we built with concertina wire, there were underground bunkers, sandbags. It was still very primitive conditions. But in the midst of that primitive conditions, with a people of a different culture, people of a different race, people of a different ethnicity, I found a home in that camp, in the midst of that jungle. And one of the things that made it a home for me was that when I went there, um, I thought about serving in the jungle. And the first thought that came to me was, I hate snakes. I don't like snakes, and I don't like tigers. Now, in the Montagnard culture, when a young person reaches the age of 12 years old, they become a responsible member of that tribe. They have to start being contributing to the survival of that tribe. They all have to know what they need to do. People need to depend on each other in order for them to function and exist as that tribe. And I picked a 15-year-old boy. He'd already been fighting for 3 years. And his name was Dale. I said to him, Dale, you got to teach me how to survive in the jungle here because I'm afraid of tigers and I'm afraid of snakes. And he laughed at me and he said, Baxi. Baxi was Vietnamese for doctor. He said, Baxi, I don't want to teach you how to survive. He said, I want to teach you how to live. He said, the jungle is not something to be feared. The jungle gives us our way of life. We live in the jungle. And he said to me that was something that was very profound. He said, Baxi, and these are my paraphrase of what he said, you can't go out into the jungle fearing it. He said, if you fear snakes, when you go out into the jungle, everywhere you look, you're going to see snakes because fear narrows your focus. You focus in on your fears. And he said, I want to teach you how to look beyond what you're afraid of. I want to teach you to be open to the other things that are out there that can give you life. So he began to teach me on how to look away from my fears and look for things that would bring me life. And not only did he teach me that living in the jungle, but he and that whole tribe taught me about how to live and develop what I call a sense of camaraderie. It was a feeling that, Dale, I trust you and love you enough that I'm going to put my life in your hands and I will do anything to keep you safe. And I trust that you will put your life in my hands and I promise to do anything to keep you safe. And so this exchange of trust and love with one another was what was the bond that made Dak Siang my home, because it was not only just the bond between Dale and myself, it was the bond that existed between that whole tribe. I had a tremendous sense of belonging there. Having gone to 11 different schools before ninth grade, I didn't really feel like I belonged anywhere. But in that time that I lived in that jungle, I belonged to that tribe. I became a part of them. Their existence with one another, their tribe, that became their identity. It's who they were as a people, and they drew strength from that. I drew strength from that. as identifying as a member of the tribe. And they accepted me. They brought me in. They loved me. And that was a very, very special experience and one that I'll cherish forever.
You said something that caught my ear, that fear narrows your focus.
Yeah.
Um, it also makes me think of something my dad has had. I've got one of his old Bibles, and in the front of it, he had written, "Fear is the dark room where negatives are developed."
That's good.
And obviously that doesn't apply today with digital photos, but back when you had to go into a dark room to develop a picture, that struck. Fear is the dark room where negatives are developed. But that's interesting. Fear narrows your focus.
And what got me was when he said, Boxy, you're afraid of snakes? When we go out into the jungle, you're going to see snakes everywhere. Even if they're not there, you're going to see them because your fears are going to be right the only thing you see. And that has meant a lot to me.
And now, Deo considered you family.
Yes. Yep.
His own family had been killed.
We had a conversation once, and I was trying to find out more information about him, about his family. And his only statement to me whenever I would bring up about family is he would just say, Boxy, you're my family. You're my family. And we developed a tremendous friendship that, for me, was tested when our camp came under attack during that battle. That's when I really became aware of the depth and the strength of that bond that we had for one another.
If you're okay going there, I'd like to talk about that battle. What was the total amount of time that you were there at Dak Siang?
I was there for, it's kind of confusing because of the action. Some people say I was medevac like the first day, some say the second day, but I know I was out of there by the third day for sure. The siege lasted for 30 more days.
Okay.
We're surrounded by 10,000.
And you had been there before the siege started. How long had you been there at the camp?
Probably about 10 months.
Okay. So, I mean, you had become very comfortable in that location. You knew that was home.
Right. I had to develop a relationship with them if I was going to be their medical care. One of the unique things that I had to do was every tribe had a witch doctor. And one of the things that was my responsibility was to develop a rapport with the witch doctor so that I could get him to trust me. I would go over and work with him, sit with him and watch him as he would go through some of his spells and his chants and stuff. And it got to the point where he'd be willing to call me over when he was having some issues, and he would ask me for my advice too. So that, as a 24-year-old kid, that was quite an experience, Steve.
So you're 24 years old. Here you are in this foreign country with this tribe, performing all kinds of surgical procedures or whatever while you're there also, right?
Right.
I mean, what would be the gamut of things you would do there in this? What kind of medicine did you practice?
We treated a lot of cholera. We treated a lot of malaria. I did some minor amputations. Very, very often, though, if something was really serious or if a major surgery, we would have the medevac back to Pleiku, where we had a hospital that was run by special forces too, and we had doctors that were there. But I delivered babies. There were diagnosis and treatment of diseases. We would have regular sick call, some gunshot wounds. I was also the preventive medicine specialist, trying to teach them some sanitation techniques. That was a pretty big challenge, trying to teach them how to use a urinal or how to use a burnout latrine, and not just do their business out in the woods somewhere. You know, it was quite an experience for a 24-year-old kid.
Did you have any faith, any kind of?
No. My only faith was in myself. If I needed to do something, I believed that I could do it. I could achieve it if I just worked hard enough and long enough. and that faith was challenged. I don't know how far ahead you want to go in the story, but that faith was challenged uh, after I had been shot. And people often ask me about the battle at Dak Siang, getting shot 3 times. They said, "What was it like getting shot and being surrounded and having all that artillery and everything coming in?" And I would tell them, I said, it was a piece of cake. It was a piece of cake compared to the battle that I fought in a hospital bed, because that battle is when I did hand-to-hand combat with death. And I say that when my courage failed, faith was born at that moment. But I had to go through every battle hand-to-hand with death, so that everything that had brought me success, everything that I was confident in, anything that had already enabled me to get what I wanted, it couldn't keep me from dying. And that's when my courage failed.
Tell us some about that battle. Tell us about when Dak Sang came under attack.
Okay, yeah, I'll share a little bit about the battle and then go into the battle in the hospital bed. But our camp was attacked and we were surrounded. It started out with like continual artillery and rocket barrage for hours and hours. And during that time, I was wounded quite seriously. Within the first hour and a half, I took some shrapnel in the spine and it knocked my spinal cord out, so I couldn't walk. And one of the things I remember shortly after being hit that time was all of a sudden being picked up. And I thought, what's happening to me? And I looked and it was Dale. And I said, "Dale, how did you find me in the midst of this chaos?" Because by then, explosions were going all over. People were dying. They had not really started coming into the wire yet, but it was just still crazy. And I was amazed that in the midst of that, he found me. And I remember him saying, "This is where I belong, with you." And he picked me up and he carried me. Everything that they said that I did in my citation, I couldn't do without Dale carrying me. I was shot 2 more times. Each time Dale brought me down into the medical bunker and they wanted me to stay down there. And I said, "No, we have to continue to fight." And Dale, because of his love for me, he brought me back out into the battle. The 3rd time I was shot, I thought I was going to die. And everybody thought I was going to die. And I said, "Dale, if I'm going to die, I'm not dying down here, Dale. Get me back to the battle." And being a warrior like he was, Dale understood that a warrior wants to die in a battle. So he willingly picked me up again, took me back out into the battle, and we continued to fight. Dale was shot in the leg. He couldn't carry me anymore, but he didn't want to leave me. And so he would drag me. We would drag each other. We would be encouraging each other, telling each other, "We're going to make this, that we're together. We're not going to leave each other." And that people often ask if I was afraid at that time. And I tell them that it may sound strange and maybe even a little untrue, but there was no fear that I felt, because at that moment I experienced something greater than fear. And what I experienced was the love between Dale and myself, the power of love to overcome fear. When I would look at Dale and he would look at me and we would, just smile, encourage each other, I was good. I was home, and we were together. We heard a rocket coming in. Dale rolled me over and laid on top of me. The rocket exploded, and Dale threw himself on top of me. When things settled down, I said, "Okay, Dale, come on, let's go." And Dale didn't move. Dale was killed. This 15-year-old boy saved my life. He not only taught me how to live in the jungle, he taught me how to live life. And for years afterwards, especially when I was in the cave, I reflected on him and his life. And I took a lot of lessons from him about how to live my life. But I woke up, I was finally medevaced, and I woke up in that hospital bed. And I remember going unconscious and being afraid, because I'd been unconscious plenty of times in college, but this was different, But I would find myself going unconscious, and I would try to bring everything that special forces had taught me so that I wouldn't go unconscious. But I did. I would pass out. And there's a verse in Ecclesiastes that says, There is no man that has power to retain the spirit, neither has he power in the day of death. And there's no discharge in that war. That was my day of death, and I was fighting hand to hand with death. After about 2 or 3 times of passing out and being afraid that that was the last time and that death was going to win, I woke up and there was a chaplain standing by me. And he just said, "Son, I'm glad to see you're awake." And I told him, I said, "I'm glad to be awake, sir." And he said that he'd been by my bed for the last few days. He said he'd been praying for me. And he asked me if I wanted to pray. And I said to him, "Pray? I don't know how to pray. I don't even know who to pray to." And he said, "That's okay, son. God knows how to listen." So at 24 years old, I made my first prayer. He handed me a cross, and I just said, and he took my hand, and I said, "God, if you're real, I need you." And all of a sudden, something happened. As I said, my courage failed. Everything that had brought me confidence was gone. There was nothing inside of me that I could depend upon. And so, as an empty shell, I reached out and I said, "God, if you're real, I need you." And something happened. I felt that there was something real, greater than death, greater than myself, that was there. And not only was it there, but it loved me, it cared for me. And I had a faith that was born. I knew that there was something greater than myself. And that realization, that experience stayed with me for the next 2 years, especially after I came home, which was a bad experience too. But I always had this experience of, wow, there is something greater than me. There's a reason that I need to keep going. I need to find out this thing, whether it's God, whoever it is, but I know it's real and I need to find it. And so that became my mission when I got out of the military, because I was so wounded, the Special Forces wasn't going to keep me anymore. And so I got out.
So tell
But
us about
those were the battles that I fought.
coming home.
I came home and I decided that I love medicine. So I wanted to switch my major. I originally been majoring in PE, phys ed, and I switched my major to pre-med now. But I was on a college campus for maybe 2 or 3 months, and college campuses back in the 70s were not a good place to be. I didn't have much money. I was sleeping in a van. Didn't have any clothes. I was wearing my Army fatigue jacket. When students would see me studying in the library, they would walk by, push my books off the table, knock me over. One day it culminated that I got spit on, and I said, "That's it. I just can't take it." I didn't like the anger that I was feeling, because that anger, the way I was treated, just added to the guilt and the anger that I had from coming back from Vietnam. I came back to the States hoping that I could heal from the trauma of war, looking for some peace. But what I found on a college campus was anger and hate that just added to my anger and hate and guilt. And I started fighting battles that were worse than the battles in Vietnam. I started fighting battles within myself. I didn't want to erupt and explode and hurt people anymore, which I could have. And I didn't want to do that. And for me, I decided that the best thing to do was to just shut down. If I don't care for anything, if I don't value anybody or anything, nobody can hurt me. I'll just stop feeling. So I shut down. I survived, but I wasn't living. And I thought about that Dale was teaching me in the jungle. "Gary, I want to teach you to do more than survive. I want to teach you how to live." But all of a sudden, I had slipped into a survival mode again. And to reinforce that survival mode, I thought the best thing to do was to hide. The best thing to do was to hide somewhere and forget about Vietnam, forget about the hurt. So I found a beautiful little cave up in northern New Hampshire in the White Mountains, and that became my home for 18 months. I lived there believing that if I could just forget about Vietnam, I'd get better. Forgetting is getting better. And when I would often tell my story at places and people would hear about the cave experience and we had time for questions and answers, nobody wanted to talk about the battle or the Medal of Honor or anything like that. They wanted to talk about the cave. because I think more people can identify with living in a cave than they can with fighting a battle in Vietnam, because we all fight battles. Maybe not a battle in the jungles of Vietnam, but we fight battles every day. And we all look for that cave, that place where we can stop hurting, that place where we can feel safe. And so they wanted to know about my experience in the cave. What happened there? How did I heal in the cave? Did I heal? And why did I come out of the cave? So that's what people wanted to know about after they hear a little bit of my story. The cave, along with the Mountain Yard Village, were significant parts of my story.
What, in retrospect, what did the cave represent?
Peace, solitude. I came out of the cave with a bunch of lessons that I taught, that I entitled life lessons. And these were life lessons that I shared with my middle school students. I taught middle school students for 33 years as a middle school counselor. And I would have a series of life lessons. And one of the first life lessons that I meant, that I taught them was, and I learned it in the cave, is that there's a difference between loneliness and solitude. In the cave, I wasn't lonely. I was lonely living out in the world. And I was amidst a lot of people, but I was shut down. I was lonely out there. But when I went into that cave, I found solitude. And solitude was a place where I could lay down and commune with myself. I went into the cave. It's ironic, but I went into the cave to try to forget. But 2 weeks after I went into the cave, I made a prayer. I said, God, you gave me my life back in Vietnam. I'm giving my life to you now. Whatever you want for me, that's all that I want for my life. 2 weeks after I made that prayer, I was told I was being awarded the Medal of Honor. 2 weeks after I gave my life totally to God, he gave me the Medal of Honor. So much for forgetting about Vietnam. Now they're going to give me a medal for it. So in the midst of that cave, I had to start reflecting upon and trying to understand, what's this medal mean? Why did I get it? I don't deserve it. What is it? How am I going to live with this? How am I going to live with this knowing that I don't deserve it? Why are you giving it to me, God? So I found in that cave, as I said, there's a difference between loneliness and solitude. I wasn't alone in that cave. I didn't go into that cave to survive. I went into that cave to learn how to live again. And I found solitude there. And that solitude provided me an opportunity to examine myself. I took a Bible in with me and I started studying about God. I wanted to find out, God, why did you give me this? And solitude was one of the greatest gifts that I had given to me in that cave, because after the solitude is when I really began to find out what God thought about me, why God gave me this, and he gave me his peace along with it. And it was that same kind of peace that I felt in that hospital bed. So the cave to me was, it was like a church. It was like a sanctuary. It became an altar for me where I laid my life down and I met with God, and he taught me about life. He taught me about the Medal of Honor. He taught me about him, himself. It was a beautiful 18 months in that cave.
Why leave that solitude then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a question that a seventh grader asked me once. He goes, Mr. B, you really seem like you love that cave. You talk about it and you get this great look on your face. And he goes, why would you ever leave something like that? And I told him, I said, well, there was a small little town called Lancaster. I had a mailbox in that town at the post office. And one day I went into the mailbox, picked up some mail, and I found this little note, piece of notebook paper. And on a note, I opened it and it said, hi, my name's Lolly. I've seen you around town. And she just started sending me notes. Now she had seen me around town because my hair was down to here at this time. And I drove a big candy apple red van. So I really stuck out in this small little New Hampshire town. It was just one main street with less than 2,000 people there, no traffic lights. So I kind of stuck out. And so she started writing me notes and putting these notes in my mailbox. Then one day she put a picture in there, and the picture's in the book, the picture she put there. And I looked at that and I said, wow, she's beautiful. And so I decided I was going to find this girl that was writing me if I had to knock on every door in that town of Lancaster. Well, one day I saw her in the laundromat, asked her out on a date. We went to the next town over, Berlin, New Hampshire, went to the movies. A couple weeks later, I said, so when are we going to get married? And she said, okay, I'll marry you, but you got to come out of the cave. She said, I'll marry you, but I'm not going into that cave. And so when the student asked me why I came out of the cave, I told him, I said, I came out of the cave because I learned that forgetting is not getting better. Getting better is finding someone who will go into that cave with you, finding someone who will come in there and love you, someone who will support you, someone who will listen to you, and someone who will promise that they will never leave you, no matter what they find out in that cave. That's what is getting better. And Lolly said that she would not come into that cave, so I had to leave the cave. And so I came out because love brought me out of that cave. But if somebody, God also came into that cave with me, and it was that same love that I met in that hospital bed that brought me out of that cave. I came out of the cave because I found that love was such an important part of healing. I came out of that cave because during the 18 months that I was there, I had developed a message about God, a message about life, a message that I wanted to share with students, that I wanted to share with others. I decided I wanted to work with young people because my belief was Deo was a 15-year-old mountaineer boy who taught me about life. If he can do that, I believe every 15-year-old, every young person has the potential to love, to care, to make a difference in the lives of someone else. And so I want to work with young people and instill in them the same values that Deo shared and taught me. So I spent 33 years sharing with young people life lessons that Deo had taught me. But I came out because I felt that God had a message. I came out because God wanted me to share that message. And I came out because Lolly wouldn't come in.
How did, we're going to wrap this thing up here shortly. How did receiving the Medal of Honor change your life?
Receiving the Medal of Honor brings a person to another battle. Every time I put this medal on, there's a battle that's being fought. You know, why am I wearing it? God taught me that this medal is not about me. There is an honor that comes with this medal, but it's not about me or anything that I've done. Matter of fact, it's not about any one person who did any one thing. The honor that comes with this medal is that this medal represents millions of men and women who every day serve, who in the past have done acts of valor, acts of love for others, acts because they love this country, because they love freedom. That's the honor that comes with this medal, is that because it's bigger than one person, bigger than one thing on one day. It represents millions of men and women. The honor that comes with this medal too is that it also carries a message with it, that there's a different way to live your life. Caring for others more than yourself. So when I put this medal on, I have to fight that battle, and I have to tell myself, Gary, it's not about you. It's about others. And for me personally, it's not about me or what I've done, but when I wear this medal around my neck, I always think of God, and I wear it for his honor, because it was only because of God's grace that I was able to survive Vietnam. It was only because of his forgiveness and his love for me that I was able to come out of that cave and live the life that he has given me. So my life has been changed in the sense that there's a purpose for my life. I remember when I first became a Christian, a friend of mine asked me to do him a favor and just read this book. I started reading it, And I asked him, I said, what kind of book is this? He said, just keep reading, Gary. And so I read through Matthew, Mark, Luke. I read through the Gospel of John, and I got to John 14. And it says, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God? I said, yes, I believe in God. I met him in a hospital bed. He said, believe also in me. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. And those were the words of Jesus. He then said, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. You're my friend, Gary. I lay my life down for you. And I thought of Deo and his laying down his life for me. And then John 15:2, he says, you have not chosen me, Gary, but I have chosen you. I've got a purpose for you. And I thought about that prayer when I said, God, I'm giving my life back to you, whatever you want for my life. And he gave me the Medal of Honor. So when I got the Medal of Honor, I believed it was just part of God's purpose and plan for my life, that I'm to share what he has done in my life and to share what he is willing to do and wants to do in the lives of others. And when I wear it for his honor.
Gary, this has just been an amazing time. On the rack behind me, you can see some challenge coins back there. For those who may not know, a challenge coin can be created by someone, oftentimes someone in the military. I'm blessed that I have several challenge coins from Medal of Honor recipients. One of my favorites is the challenge coin from Gary Beikirch. And at the bottom of the challenge coin, it says, for his honor. Gary, I want to thank you for being my friend. I want to thank you for this time today. I hope to other people that it's been as impactful to them as it's been to me. I really appreciate your friendship, friendship of Lolly. Whenever I get to see you two, you are always so gracious and kind to me. Any final words you'd like to say, Gary, before we sign off?
If I could, if there's one message I wanted to share, and actually it was the message that Lolly and I wanted to share in our book. You know, we dedicated that book to anyone who's fought through a battle or sought shelter in a cave. Little did we know that when our book was released, that we as a nation would be fighting a battle with COVID-19. And little did we know that we would be quarantined and, in a sense, be sheltered in the caves of our homes with masks and social distancing. So it's really ironic that our book was released when we were in the midst of something like this. But the message of that book, the dedication was to anyone who's fought through a battle or sought shelter in a cave. And what we hope is that through the words of our story, the words of our life, our journey, that people would be able to find words of faith, words of hope, and words of love to help them in their journey as they face challenges and as they may seek the shelter of a cave to change the way they feel, to feel safe. But we want them to know that there's a God who is there. There's a God who's willing to come into your cave. There's a God who wants to come into your cave. He wants to be there with you. He wants to be there with you in every battle that you're going to face. There's a God who's there that not only does he want you to survive, but he wants you to live. His purpose for our life is more than just to survive this. And I hear so many people say, I survived COVID-19. I don't want to survive COVID-19. I want to live through it. Just as I lived in the jungle, I learned how to live there. We can learn how to live in the midst of this COVID pandemic if we know that there's a God who is there, who's willing to be with us every step of the way, who will teach us how to live. It's my prayer that if you are in a cave, that you'll seek the God who wants to come into that cave with you and bring you out and bring you into a life that he has planned for you.
Gary, thanks so much. Gary didn't ask me to do this, but that's the book. And Blaze of Light, wherever you buy books, I would encourage you to get that. I asked, I wanted to share that for Gary.
Thank you, Steve.
Hey, if absolutely, if you've been encouraged by today, I'd love for any of you to send me a note, steve@steveamerson.com. If you want to send something to Gary, send me the email. I'd love to share it with Gary and with Lolly. If today has been an inspiration to you. Let me do this. Heavenly Father, I pray for Gary and for Lolly today. I thank you for his service to our nation, but also his service to you. Thank you. I thank you that he would share with us his story today. And I pray that people will be encouraged by this, by his words, by his message of not just surviving, but of really living. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Gary, thanks for being with us today, sir.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do some more ministering with you, Steve. It's a real blessing.
Gary, I count it an honor. Please tell your wife I said hello, and I look forward to the next time we can be together.
Sure will, Steve. God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
Thanks, sir.